A loner rancher helped a beautiful dying Apache girl, then 50 hired guns came. That's how folks tell it now, as if it started with fire and ended with thunder. But the truth was quieter than that. It began on a windless evening, just as the sky softened from gold to rust. I'd been riding the northern fence, checking posts bent by the last dust storm. The Marais' hooves stirred nothing but hush beneath them. Out there, the land breathed slow, like it had all the time in the world to forget people had ever touched it. There was a silence I carried in my chest. Not the kind you get from being alone. No, this one was heavier, the kind that settles after too much living. Some men fill their homes with sound. I filled mine with stillness. Each plank of wood and rusted nail in my cabin remembered a story I stopped telling long ago. That day, I fixed 2 splintered rails, shot a rattlesnake that coiled too close to the coop, and split enough cedar to outlast a week of rain that never came. Then I sat under the porch light and whittled at a crooked piece of oak until the shape of a horse emerged from the shavings. Small and broken, dash-legged, I was folding my blade when I heard it, not a voice, not a cry, just the screech of a hawk, sudden and sharp, slicing the sky like a warning. Something in me moved before my thoughts did. I saddled the Marais and followed the sound past the ridge. The sun was down low now, casting long, dying shadows over the wash, and that's when I saw her. She lay curled in the dried-out gully like something dropped from a height. A blanket, if you could call it that, clung to her thin shoulders, torn and soaked with sweat. Her skin was the color of sand, baked beneath 100 summers, but it was pale with dust and pain. Blood, not fresh, not gushing, just caked and blackened along her collarbone, as if it had dried days ago and no one noticed. I didn't speak. There wasn't anything words could do. She was still breathing, but just barely, soft, rattling. Inhales like each one might be the last. She clutched something to her chest, a little rawhide satchel no bigger than a man's palm. Her knuckles were white around it. For a long moment I just stood there. Not in shock, not in awe, just ... listening to how still she made the world feel. Then I stepped down, lifted her slow as I could. She didn't flinch, that scared me more than if she had. She didn't weigh more than a sack of flour. Her limbs hung like snapped twigs against my arms. Her breath ghosted my neck, shallow, warm, human dot back at the cabin. I laid her on the cot near the hearth and lit the fire low. I boiled water, cleaned her wounds, worked soft cloth against dried blood. The cut on her thigh had scabbed wrong, too tight, too puckered. I washed it and wrapped it with the last of my clean bandage. She stirred once, muttered something in a tongue I didn't know. It wasn't meant for me. I didn't ask her name, didn't offer mine. Sometimes words make things worse. When the moon rose, I sat on the porch and watched it drift through the clouds like a boat too tired to sail. Behind me, her breathing steadied. I thought about all the years I'd sat in that same chair, hearing nothing but wind. And now, one stranger's breath, faint, quiet, barely there, felt louder than a gunshot. I didn't know who she was, but that night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a ghost. I watched the moon until the cold touched my boots. Then I closed the door behind me and sat in the corner, where I could still hear her breathing. She slept without crying out, and I, for once, slept without dreams. She woke before the sun rose. I heard it in the shift of the old cot, the creak that followed her weight as she tried to move without sound. I stayed still by the stove, letting the fire warm the beans I'd set to simmer. I didn't turn, I just listened. Her feet hit the floor, bare, cautious, like a deer testing ice. She stood too fast, and her knees buckled. I heard her gasp, soft and broken. Then the rustle of wool as she caught herself against the wall. When I did turn, she was already halfway to the door, panting through clenched teeth. Her eyes, wild, deep, dark, locked on mine like I was something from her nightmares. Maybe I was. I raised a hand, not as a threat, just a quiet promise that I wouldn't come closer. But she flinched like the gesture itself burned. She reached for the doorframe with trembling fingers, made it 2 more steps, then folded like dry paper to the floor. I didn't rush. Just knelt beside her after a moment, set a blanket beside her like you'd lay an offering on sacred ground. Then I left a tin cup of water near her hand and walked out into the yard. The hawk circled above the pines. The same one, I thought. Or maybe a different one. Some things don't need names to feel the same. I spent the morning splitting logs down by the creek. Took longer than it needed to. When I came back, the blanket was back on the cot, and the cup was empty. She hadn't run. Not that day and not the one after that either. She didn't speak. Neither did I leave food on the table, water by the window. She'd move it, eat just enough to stay upright. The rest, I noticed, she left untouched, likely testing if I'd poison what I gave. I didn't blame her. She stayed mostly inside, watching through the cracked window, eyes wary, limbs folded. Like someone always bracing for a whip, sometimes. At dusk, she'd step out and gather wood. Not far, just a few paces from the cabin. She walked barefoot, her steps lighter than wind, and never made a sound. I left extra coffee in the pot one morning. Not much. Just enough for 2 cups. By the time I returned from mending the chicken wire, her cup was empty, rinsed, and set back in the same place I'd left it. That's how we spoke, in gestures, in rhythm. A kind of conversation where the pauses said more than the words. There was a moment one evening, as the fire crackled and the shadows stretched long across the walls, when she reached up and pulled something from her tangled hair, a single hawk feather, bone white at the base, streaked. With copper near the tip, she set it on the mantel. Didn't look at me. Didn't need to. It wasn't a gift. Not a gesture of thanks. It was protection. She never said, but I felt it in my gut. She wasn't just running. She was being hunted. I made a trip to town a few days later. Needed salt, a new hammerhead, and bullets. Always bullets. Dust kicked up as I rode down the main stretch. Storefronts leaned tired against each other, and the saloon already reeked of last night's regret. Inside the general store, the shelves were half-stocked, and the clerk wore that same tight-lipped expression he always gave me, like I brought. The silence of the prairie inn with me, I kept to myself until I heard them, 2 men standing near the counter behind me. One had the loose, slurred tone of a drunk too used to being ignored. The other, colder, spoke with the weight of someone who made a living off others' pain. Saw her down by Red Creek, the drunk said. Apache girl. Pretty one, half-blood. Maybe, wounded but moving. Could be the one from that mess at Dunlow's. Price has been raised, the cold one replied. Double for her head. Triple if she's brought back alive. They laughed. The sound hollowed something inside me. She won't make it past the next moon, the drunk muttered. Girls like that? They got no place left. I didn't turn. Just paid for my things and walked out, slow and steady, like my spine was. The only thing holding back fire. Back at the ranch, I found her on the porch. She didn't flinch when I rode up. Didn't move at all. Just stared out toward the hills like waiting for something worse than time. That night I fortified the barn. Not loud, not obvious, quiet work. Repositioned the tools. Set the extra planks near the rear exit. Hid the long rifle under the porch floorboards. She watched me from inside. Didn't ask. Didn't stop me. Just kept weaving her braid, slow, methodical, as if the act itself was what kept her breathing. Later we sat by the fire. Her on the cot, me in my chair. The wind picked up outside, rustling the old cottonwoods. Their limbs scraped the roof like dry bones. She looked up, out the window, then pointed, not with urgency, just a soft gesture toward the stars above. She whispered a single word in Apache. I didn't understand it. Not fully, but I nodded anyway, and she didn't say another word. We didn't need names. Some things are known. Just by being near enough. That night she leaned just a little toward me. Barely enough for our shoulders to brush. She stayed there until the fire burned low. And for the first time in years I realized the silence in my cabin no longer belonged to just me. The first time she spoke, it wasn't a full word. More like a breath wrapped in sound, a syllable shaped by trust. Not language. It was morning, mist still clinging to the ground. She stood by the fence, holding a tin cup I'd left filled with lukewarm coffee, and I was chopping wood nearby. Her voice rose like a breeze passing through a canyon, not sharp. Not certain, just dar. I stopped. Didn't turn. Just listened. She said something again, clearer this time. One word, her name, I heard it like thunder in my bones. A name no one else knew, not the men who chased her, not the town that spat when they said Apache. Not even the earth she'd bled on, only me. I didn't repeat it. Just nodded once, slow and sure. She never said it again. Some things, when shared once, are sacred. From that day we moved a little differently. I'd catch her watching me more, not with fear, but with a quiet curiosity, like she was counting the small ways I didn't ask for anything, like she was waiting to see if the kindness would fade. It the idea in single quotes. One evening, as shadows stretched long across the canyon, I offered her the old Winchester I kept beneath the floorboards. She looked at it like it was a riddle, not a gift. A lesson. I led her to the clearing out back where I'd nailed tin cans to an old tree trunk. Her hands trembled when she held the stock. I didn't touch her, just showed her how to breathe through the sight. When she finally fired, the sound startled a crow from the pines. She missed, but she didn't drop it. Her jaw set, firm. Her spine straightened. She tried again. That night, we didn't speak, but her shoulders sat taller when she walked inside. Later, I found the rifle resting against the porch post, cleaned the chamber, checked. She didn't keep it, just learned it. She wasn't arming for war. She was reclaiming something that had been stolen. The next night, as I finished stacking firewood, I heard her humming. It was faint, like wind through cracked glass, soft and full of ghosts. A tune from her people, maybe. Or maybe one she made up just to feel her own voice. She sat near the hearth, bare feet tucked beneath her, eyes closed. The sound wrapped around the room like smoke, ancient, aching, beautiful. My hands, rough from years of calluses and rope, burns, trembled so hard I nearly dropped the lantern. She didn't see me watching, didn't need to. The song wasn't for me, but she didn't stop singing. That was enough. The next day, I rode the ridge to check on the cattle. The grass had grown dry, a sign of long summer coming. But what struck me wasn't the sky or the wind. It was the hoof prints. 3 sets, deep, deliberate. Not from wild mustangs. These were riders, heavy ones. Scouts, maybe. They didn't come to visit that same afternoon. I hitched the wagon and rode to town. Needed nails, oats, and a quiet look at who'd been talking behind their drinks. At the post office, a yellowed flyer fluttered on the board. New ink, new price. Wanted, Apache female. Escaped fugitive. Last seen near Red Creek, armed and dangerous. $200 dead. $500 alive. Below it, in sharper ink, payment guaranteed. Authorized by Judge F. Walcott. And under that, barely legible in smudged print, mercenary riders to be deputized. They weren't just looking now. They were sending men who'd be paid for blood. I folded the flyer, tucked it in my coat, and rode home slow, like the dust on my boots might be the last trace I left behind. She was by the creek when I returned, kneeling, watching the water move over smooth stones. The light hit her just right, painted her scars in gold, not to hide them. To honor them. A crow landed nearby, black eyes watching. She glanced at it, then back at me. Didn't smile. Just nodded once, as if she'd been waiting to know when the storm would come. She never asked if we'd run. Neither did I. That night, I pulled the shotgun from the root cellar and cleaned every shell I owned. Oil, rag, click, stack. My hands moved. On their own, like they remembered how it felt to prepare for something you might not come back from. She painted symbols on the barn. Red, ochre, white, drawn with steady hands and old purpose. She didn't explain them. I didn't ask. They weren't for show. They were warnings. That cabin, once a place for my silence, had become a battleground for hers, but we didn't speak of war. Instead, we ate in quiet, sat by the fire like the world wasn't turning its guns toward us. She reached for my hand once, not to hold, just to rest hers beside it. Our fingers didn't touch, but the space between them felt like the only truth left in the world. We weren't lovers, we weren't kin, but something between us had been built, slow as sunrise, deep as canyon stone, 1,000 miles of silence had stretched between who we were and what we'd become, now. It was almost time to see if it would hold when the noise came. Dawn came with no birdsong. Just dust curling on the horizon, carried by the breath of something long and heavy. I stood on the porch with the rifle across my lap, boots planted firm in the dirt. She sat just inside, braiding her hair in silence. The same way she had every morning since the stars began to shift between us. Then we heard it, the thunder of hooves. Not one, not 10, 50. They came over the rise like a storm that had waited too long to fall. Men in black dusters. Some with rifles slung low, others with pistols swinging at their sides like threats already promised. Their leader rode in front, taller than the rest, chin lifted like he'd already written the ending. I didn't wait for the dust to settle. Saddled the mare, pulled my hat low, rode out slow like I wasn't afraid, because I wasn't not anymore. They stopped 100 paces out. The leader, pale eyes, scar down his cheek, mouth drawn tight with a cruel sort of pride, chuckled when he saw me. "This the whole welcoming party?" he called. I didn't answer. Just sat tall in the saddle, watching him like I was waiting. For him to figure out the land had already made its decision. He spat into the dirt. "Tell the girl to come out," he said. "We don't need blood today." Behind me, the cabin door creaked open. She stepped onto the porch, bow in hand, her braid tight down her back. Dress still stained from the dust she'd bled in. Her eyes weren't afraid. The leader blinked. Just once, then scowled. "She's worth more alive." One of the riders muttered behind him. "And you think," I said finally, "that makes this easier?" He grinned. "You plan to fight all 50 of us alone?" "No." I turned my horse to the left, leading them just a bit away from the cabin, toward the ravine where the old cattle trail once dipped low and unseen. They followed, slow, cautious now. The kind of caution men get when they sense the earth beneath them, remembering old bones. That's when it began. The first horse bucked wild, caught its hoof on something deep. A pit I'd dug 2 nights prior, covered with brush, lined with jagged fence rails. The rider screamed as he went down, gun flying. Leg twisting wrong, the second one never even saw the wire, thin, rusted, stretched low between rocks. His horse hit it at speed, flipped, crushed him beneath. The rest scattered in panic. Shouts echoing across the canyon like thunder off stone. Then came silence, the kind you only hear after men realized they're not hunting wolves. They're being hunted by ghosts. I dismounted, stood in the open. The leader came last, face red with rage, gun drawn but hanging low like he was trying to decide if he was still in control. "You think scare tactics'll stop this?" he growled. I didn't. "Move." He stepped forward. "You know how many men I've killed." I dropped my rifle, let it fall soft into the dirt. Then I took 3 steps forward. Hands empty, he raised his gun behind me. I heard the soft stretch of a bowstring drawn full. She stepped up beside me, barefoot in the dirt. Her chin lifted, her eyes locked on him, like she'd already measured his soul and found it small. "You don't see what's sacred," she said, clear, steady, in the kind of English that leaves no room for misunderstanding. He sneered. "Sacred's what we bury." Then she let the arrow fly. It struck his thigh, not deep, but enough to make him scream, enough to bring him to his knees. She didn't notch another. He lay there in the dust, cursing, bleeding, humiliated. She walked past him without a word, bow low at her side. I followed. We didn't say a thing. By the time we reached the cabin again, the remaining riders had gone, fled, maybe just waiting in the hills. But they didn't matter. The message had been sent. The next day, word had already reached town. A rider saw the men scatter, said they looked like they'd seen something worse than death, the bounty. Flyers came down by week's end. No one ever rode that ridge. Again. Not to hunt, not to ask questions. Not to take what wasn't theirs. That night, we didn't light the fire. Just sat under the stars, letting the silence speak for us. Our hands rested near each other again. This time, fingers touched. Not a claim, not a promise. Just. Something real. When morning came, we rode out. No map. No destination. Just the road. And the wind and the feeling that maybe, just maybe, something like peace could grow where fear used to live. They'll tell the story different, I reckon, say the guns were blazing. Say we fought like legends, but the truth is simpler. She saved me long before I ever found her got. And sometimes, the ones you save are the ones who save you back. And sometimes, 50 hired guns aren't near enough to break the silence between two souls that chose each other without needing a name.